So if you are someone who knows that lacking in assertiveness has diminished past relationships, has caused you to not engage in the quality of sex that you want, has hurt your career or has hurt your business, and you know that consciously, then to develop that skill is to develop your personas, to develop your identity in a more effective manner that you know is going to contribute to yourself and that you know will eventually, hopefully, ripple out into your family, your relationship, your community in some capacity.
This is The Deep Dive with Adam Roa.
Yo, what is up, deep divers? Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Deep Dive podcast. I am your host, Adam Roa, and today I got my friend Connor Beaton here from ManTalks, the founder of ManTalks, which is an international organization that's basically focused on men's health, wellness, success, diving into shadow work, diving into dating, diving into relationships, mental health, so much, and really targeted towards helping and supporting men. And you have been, you've spoken all over the world on all kinds of stages, TEDx and all these things. You've been featured in, Forbes and Huffington Post and all the places. And you and I actually first got connected back when I was touring Canada with my spoken word poetry show, Permission to Think Freely. And so we got connected then. And since then, we were just talking before recording. Since then, I've just been tracking your work and seeing you, in my words, become more potent. It felt like your message, and I know you said the similar thing about me. It felt like you were embodying the message more. And I know you've become a father recently, so I'm so excited for that. And so I'm stoked to have you on here to explore this topic, which is, have conscious men become too soft? That question is something that I know there's immediately people going, yes, absolutely. And then there's some conscious men going, I don't think I'm soft. Like, what the hell? And so I'm excited to dive into this. Before we do that, bro, I just want to say welcome to the Deep Dive.
Thank you. I appreciate you, man. It's so nice to be here. It's so nice to see your smiling face. And yeah, I'm deeply excited to get into this conversation because I feel like it needs to be had.
Yeah. Before we get into the conversation, let people know the 60-second, who is Connor Beaton now, today? How would you describe yourself and how people can get a sense of who you are as we enter into this conversation?
Yeah. Like you said, recently I became a father, and that has shifted my world as it does. You can't bring a little entity into the world. It's been such a incredible experience to literally see consciousness come online and begin to interact with the world around it. And so I feel like that's put me in touch with a different quality of spirituality. But the work that I do, like you said, is largely with men. My background is I've mentored and apprenticed with a number of exceptional psychologists who have specialized in Jungian psychology, shadow work, CBT, Gestalt therapy. And that has just led me down this path of working with men for their own betterment, whether that's bettering themselves as a husband, as a father, as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, sexually, relationally, from communication standpoint, and helping men push their edge, face their fears, push their edges, and step into a more actualized, mature version of themselves. And so I have a podcast. We host some in-person events and sort of deep dives into men's work. And then I'm married. My wife, her name is Vienna, and she is, maybe some of your people know her. She's at Mindful FT on Instagram. She's a marriage and family therapist. Like the marriage and family therapist, like the motherfucking therapist. Can I swear on your show? Because I just dropped an F-bomb. Okay.
All that means is there's an E next to the episode.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. And so every once in a while, I have the good fortune of getting to work alongside my wife and do work with couples on relationships. And that is a beautiful experience.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. There's more men stepping in to support other men is a necessity, I think, at this stage, because one of the things that I've learned as I got back into men's work. So I sort of, for myself, have been a coach, full-time coach, primarily since 2013. That's still how I earn the vast majority of my income. And then, my poetry took off and my artistry took off. And most people now know me for being a creative more than a coach in a lot of ways. And so there's this interesting blend. And I recently facilitated with Sacred Sons and did some work with them as a facilitator. And I went, I remember this part of me. I remember the facilitator part of me. I remember the coach part of me that's like used to do group programs and that sort of thing. And being at an event that had 150 men at it and being a facilitator there and seeing what's possible, it just reminded me the importance of men supporting other men. There's just things that as I don't care who you are, there are things that you don't bring to your woman. There are things that you bring to other men, and that's actually healthy. That's a part of a healthy, full, holistic, tribe is you have men to bring your men shit to, because quite honestly, one, it's not fair to project it on your woman. And two, your woman's not actually the one to hold the space for that. And because a lot of times what you're going through is about her or interacting with her.
Right.
And so I'm so appreciative of that you have stepped into that work in the way that you have. And I'm curious, when we look at this question of have conscious men become too soft? I think the starting point for me is let's define it a little bit, conscious men, because I don't necessarily mean spiritual. We can actually go into the difference between that. And then when we say too soft, what are we actually saying there? So we have framework. Do you want to frame us up on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think from a very direct standpoint, right in the very beginning, like all men are conscious to some degree. And I think that when we talk about conscious men, generally it's men who are aiming towards some form of self-betterment, right? They're trying actively to be more aware. They're trying actively to be more conscious, whether it's of their behaviors, their health, their, how they show up in relationships, how they impact society, family, etc. So that's generally how I would define conscious men. And there's different gradients to that, like you talked about. I think certainly, there's a huge spiritual component of conscious men that has emerged within our culture and society. It's something like, I think it's 42% of Americans now identify as spiritual, but not religious. And so, there's this huge movement of, I am actively seeking to be more aware of my actions. I'm actively seeking to be connected spiritually. So that's how I would frame conscious men. What would you add to that?
For me, consciousness is pretty much synonymous with awareness. And so to be a conscious man is to be an aware man. And for me, what that looks like is anyone who is actively in the pursuit of more self-awareness is what I would consider a conscious man. And so that generally means that it's going to be a man who's engaged in personal development. Because really that's what personal development is, right? Yeah. Is becoming more self-aware. Yep. And why do I feel this way? Why do I get triggered here? Why do I have a problem with intimacy? Why, whatever it is, becoming more aware of why you are the way that you are and how you can more consciously, more awarely and intentionally shift that. And so for people, like if you're listening to this, you're in it. You know what I mean? Like, welcome to personal development. Welcome to being conscious. And when I think about too soft, I think about the man who has essentially let go of, foregone, pushed away, or maybe have never connected to their warrior energy. The energy of the masculine that wants to burn shit down, the energy of the masculine that does go into like hunter, I will kill within every man. within every man and woman too, but like specifically with men, with that masculine protector, fighter, warrior, there is the part of you that can kill. Like look at throughout history at what men have done. It's in us. That's not that just because you haven't done it doesn't mean it's not within you to be able to do it. And the embracing of that part of me has been a massive journey and transformative in so many ways. And so when I say too soft, I think about men who aren't connected to their fire, their warrior, who may be more in their feminine energy, not by choice, but because they're literally afraid of their masculine energy. That's how I would define too soft. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I think the only thing I would add is generally it's men who lack some quality of assertiveness, like are afraid of being assertive and are confrontation avoidant. Like they don't like confrontation. They don't like to confront the parts of themselves that are unruly. They don't like to have confrontation in their relationship. They don't like to have confrontation in general. And generally have bought into this narrative that masculinity is dangerous in some capacity, or to embody some of these more what would be considered traditionally masculine traits or yang traits is somehow going to be a threat or a danger to other people, not realizing that to live in the opposition of that is to cause equally as much harm. But I'm sure we can get into that. So I would,
and I love that you said yang as well. So for everyone who's very sensitive to gender normative expressions and things like that, we're using masculine and feminine. For me, it's easy because of the just associations to it, especially for this conversation of what it means to be masculine. So I'm comfortable using it, and we all have masculine and feminine in us. Every woman has masculine energy in her, yang energy, yin yang energy. Every man has yin energy. So yeah, I
was just going to say, like Jung, I'm a big proponent of Carl Jung's work. And so, he called it the anima and the animus, right? The anima was the feminine. It was the embodiment of a lot of those traits. And the animus was the masculine. And, he really believed like within his framework that within a man, his consciousness was generally the sort of like masculine essence, the animus essence, and then his unconscious represented the anima. And so in a man, our unconscious mind is represented by the feminine. And so it's something that we have to develop a relationship and build a relationship with, which gets very interesting when you start to look at shadow work and et cetera. But yeah, I think a lot of that softness comes from abandoning these more animus oriented, masculine yang traits, because in some ways we've been told, I think a lot of men have bought into this idea. I was going to just go like straight into it if you're cool with that.
Yeah, dude.
But I think that a lot of men have bought into this idea that they will somehow be a safer man or a good man or a more equitable man or a more acceptable man to women if they abandon some of those overly direct, assertive, unapologetic traits that might make them more masculine. Or they have been harmed by the masculine. So they actually carry a wounding around the masculine, right? One of the most damaging things that we can look at culturally, socially for most men is that they've grown up in a household that is absent of fathers. And I think our generation and the generation before ours has somewhat experienced this plague of absent fathers. And when I say absent fathers, I mean anything from men who legitimately weren't there, right? They were away at war, they were away at work, they had died, they had, moved away, to men who were present, were there sometimes, but were largely mentally or emotionally checked out, right? They were watching TV constantly all weekend, they're drinking, they're addicts, they're, whatever the case may be, they're just generally disengaged. So I think there's a lot of softness that has been produced out of a lack of very clear, grounded, strong, masculine role models, like really good masculine male role models.
So would you say I agree with so much of what you said. And I'm curious, just directly, like, do you, having worked with as many men as you have over the years, would you say that conscious men have become too soft in a general sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would agree. Just so everyone listening to this. And so what I think is valuable is, as two men who have worked with a lot of men from a facilitation capacity, if this is what we're seeing, then the conversation really becomes, okay, what's causing that? Right. And that's what you started to speak to, the absentee father. And I feel a question that I have for you is, do you think that men in general have become too soft? Because in the conscious space, what I find is that what is personal development, right? It's becoming more self-aware. In order to become more self-aware, really, what are your indicators of what's actually going on? It's your emotions. And so to some degree, to a large degree, personal development is the exploration of your emotions, what you're feeling, actually saying, this is what I'm feeling, being able to communicate that, being able to actually acknowledge that you are feeling that and not push it away. That is what personal development is. And that's something that I find that it comes so much more just culturally and maybe biologically natural to women and the feminine. And so as a result, men, in many ways, the personal development world is opposite to maybe our initial instinctual biology of lone wolfing it, but also to definitely also to the cultural stigma of what it means to be a man and how not to share your emotions, how to suck it up, how to don't be a little pussy or whatever. That, for me, I know is a part of personal development. And so I could see how the personal development world, the conscious world, and that kind of bubble of it might be filled with more men who were already leaning towards softness of their feminine. And so I'm curious, in just general, rather than the sample size of just within that conscious community, do you feel like men in general are also too soft, or what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that some men have moved in the opposition, after the sort of like liberation of women and the Me Too era, which, I don't think we necessarily need to go down that path too much, but I think after that, I think men kind of started to go in two different directions, right? Some men were like, F this, you're right. There's like the men going their own way movement, which is sort of like a revolt against the feminist ideology. And then other men, really adopted a more feminine way of being, having, really taking on having women dictate what a man should look like. And so there's those two pieces that have started to emerge. I don't necessarily think that men in general are too soft. I think in general, there's a lot of men outside of the personal development space who still adopt a lot of the old school narratives that disconnect them from emotional openness, from emotional acuity, from being able to tune into what they're experiencing. I also wanted to say that, I wanted to bring my flavor of personal development. I think in many ways, again, just to like bring it back to Jung, personal development is really about developing the persona. It's about developing our ego in some ways. It's about developing the image that we bring out into the world. And so it's not only like a huge part of that is about understanding our emotions, but another part of it is about being able to specifically and intentionally craft our identity in the way that we see as being more beneficial to both ourselves and the community around us. Right. It's so that's, we can look at things like, let's say that you lack assertiveness. Well, part of your personal development would be to develop the skill of assertiveness. And that is going to develop your persona. That's going to shape and mold your identity in many ways. So I just wanted to add that in there. And then
can I
sure,
interject something there? I'm curious. That seems to imply the idea that we should all be developing all, like everything. Like if you lack assertiveness, you get to develop assertiveness. If you lack courage, you get to develop courage. If you lack passion, you get to develop passion. Sure, we have positive correlations to these words, and I feel the part of me that's going, yeah, everyone should have the ability to have these things. But what aspect of it is also just there's certain character traits that you don't have to say, well, you have to develop your courage. Like maybe for in your circles, the life that you want to lead, you don't need to be assertive and you find your, like, do you know what I mean? Totally. I feel like there's kind of that assumption are we saying that it's a good thing for everyone?
What I'm saying is, to be able to identify the aspects and attributes about yourself, your identity, your ego, that you know of consciously as to be holding you back, and to, in some ways, attack that part. And when I say attack, I don't actually mean like attack. I mean to go after.
That would be too masculine, bro.
Right? Yeah, that would be far over the line, right? Controversial language. But to go at those parts and to begin to reshape them, because embedded around those parts, right? I was just using assertiveness as an example because we're talking about, conscious soft men who usually lack assertiveness. Right? They usually lack a sense of directness. They usually lack a sense of clarity about being very clear on what it is that they want, the type of man that they want to be, the type of relationship that they want to be in, the type of partner that they want to be with, and to be very clear and direct on what that actually looks like. So if you are someone who knows that lacking in assertiveness has diminished past relationships, has caused you to not engage in the quality of sex that you want, has hurt your career or has hurt your business, and you know that consciously, then to develop that skill is to develop your personas, to develop your identity in a more effective manner that you know is going to contribute to yourself and that you know will eventually, hopefully, ripple out into your family, your relationship, your community in some capacity. And I think what this really boils down to is, I think one of the root causes, I've had the fortune to speak with some really incredible men over the last few years and to learn from really, really exceptional elders and mentors. And one of the things that I've continued to see consistently is that I think that a byproduct of what we're experiencing within male culture today, whether it's the soft conscious man, right? The overly soft conscious man, or it's the overly hardened everyday man that is completely disconnected from his emotions, right? That's emotionally constipated and locked up and isn't able to express himself, is that we're experiencing this kind of plague of uninitiated men, that men have not been through a kind of initiatory experience that would cause them to confront themselves, the aspects of themselves that they fear, the aspects of life that they would fear. And so they move through life in a kind of pseudo adolescent adult male entity, right? That where they might have success on the outside. I see a lot of this in the men that I've worked with. They're early 40s. They have great success. They've built a family, but underneath that, they feel like a fraud. Or underneath that, they feel insecure about their relationship. Or underneath that, they feel like they can't ask for what they really desire or want in their marriage or in their business. And so a lot of that, I would say, stems from a severe lack of initiation within our culture.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have rites of passage, really. Right. And in most indigenous cultures, they had them. Yeah. And the thing that's interesting for me around it is I look at it from the perspective of, okay, what are we running from? What are we running to? Right. And what's actually the motivator? And so to have all these men that are moving into a space of being too soft and having lost that fire and that edge and that warrior, I think that what they're running from, a lot of it stems from the vilification of the masculine that we've seen happen over the last, I don't know, it seems like it got super intense over the last 10 years. so the last decade has just been this, this aspect of, I had Aubert Bastiat on my podcast from Sacred Sons, actually, and we asked the question: are men to blame for all of the world's problems? That was our deep dive question, and the reason for that is because that seems to be the narrative.
Yeah.
It definitely seems to be the narrative is men have caused all of the problems. Men are the ones to blame. And as a result of that, if you claim your manhood, you are claiming evil. You are in bed with the devil. You are claiming the part of you that's caused so much harm. And so then there's this part of the masculine that's going, wait a second, I care about people. I love people. So am I am I a bad guy deep down? Well, let me move away from this. And so there's a running from that's happening there. And then there's a running to. And I think the running to is, can be described as men are being rewarded for being in their feminine within the conscious communities. And especially, we're going to say the conscious community of personal development, but as someone who runs in a lot of deeply hippie, spiritual, festival-y communities as well, it's just amplified there. So everything we're saying from the conscious space, I would say, is amplified in the quote unquote spiritual space. Yeah. And what I'm seeing is you get rewarded for being in your feminine. I noticed that, wow, like I have all these women, specifically, I have like these women that are like acknowledging me for sharing my emotions. I have all of these women who are coming to me and telling me how safe I feel because they don't feel like any sexual energy coming from me or any of that. I'm a safe space. And I know a lot of men can relate to this. There's this reward structure in place for a man coming in and exemplifying their feminine energy because it's so opposite of what was in the masculine. So there's a reward structure here. And I think the combination of what we're running from and the reward system of what we're running to is a perfect storm for these marshmallow men.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think in many ways, especially about the reward system component. I think a lot of men, look, it's intoxicating, right? What do most men want? What do you want as a teenage boy that's attracted to women? You want attention from women. You want them to validate you. You want them to want you. You enter into manhood, into adulthood, and you start, chasing women. And so what's one of the easiest ways to get that attention and validation from women in our modern culture? It's to openly display feminine traits, right? To do those things that women have said, hey, we want you to do those things. Check this box off. And of course, we're very rational. So we're like, cool, I'll check that box off for you. And yet then we get into, guys will get into a relationship in that dynamic. They won't speak their needs. They'll withhold it. They'll become resentful. Maybe passive aggressiveness comes out. The relationship starts to have some problems. I mean, I've seen this hundreds and thousands of times, right? Where that path goes. And then I also get DM'd from thousands of women being like, where are all the strong men? And it's like, well, you've told them to fuck off, right? Like you've kind of told them that you don't want them around. It's so much like I remember I held an event and there was like 250 people there. And one of the women in the front asked a question about men, and she was like, where are all the strong, assertive men? And I was like, well, tell me about the men that you date. And she proceeded to basically verbatim tell me that she tells all the men that she dates that she doesn't need them. And I'm like, well, you're
cutting off the masculine desire.
Yeah, you're cutting off the masculine desire, which is, I want to have a function in our relationship. I want to have a purpose. I want to know that in some way I'm needed. And that doesn't mean that I have to show up and pay all your bills and do all that kind of stuff. And, that doesn't mean that at all. But I want to know that I have a place in your life. And so, I think in many ways, I think that men are more confused than they've ever been. soft, whether it's the conscious soft man or not, but especially the conscious soft men, because they're chasing what they think women want them to be. And every woman's a little bit different. Every woman has a little bit of a different flavor. And so I see a lot of conscious men trying to pretzel themselves into who they think a woman wants them to be. And it's a ever moving target.
You're familiar with sexual mimicry?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like the cuttlefish, right? The cuttlefish that pretends it paints. So the way that it works is there's this female fish that this male fish wants to mate with. And on the side that's facing the female, it'll make itself look male. But then on the side that's facing out, so other males might see it, it makes itself look female. So that the males think, oh, that's not a rival. Right. To avoid rivalry. And that happened. There's also like hyenas that do something similar. This idea of behaving more feminine in sense to avoid rival males and to get closer to potential mates.
Yeah.
And that is definitely happening. Yeah. That is 100% happening in the conscious space, in the spiritual space, especially to the point that I'm going to make sure that I speak to the absolute revulsion I have around people who are using spirituality, spiritual languaging, the enlightenment guru thing to get into bed with women. Mm-hmm. Like, fuck you, grow up and actually embrace your masculinity, because the reason you're doing that is because you don't actually feel man enough. That's what's underneath. I think so much of this is that there's a deep fear in men that they're not enough. And I did another podcast on this, Connor, and I'd love to share it with you because this is my thought process around like the actual energetic dynamics of the masculine and feminine. Like the feminine will always want more. Always. That's just how the feminine, it's the receiver of all of creation. She will always want more. The masculine by design then is coded to always want to fill that space, always biologically, but also just energetically. Your woman says she wants something more. You're like, how do I give that to her? Right. But the wound to that is I'm never enough. I'm never enough. I'm never going to be enough. And I think there are so many men that actually feel that. There are so many men who feel completely terrified that they're not enough, that they're not man enough. And as a result to that, they go, okay, how do I be less man to get the same result? How can I become more feminine then to get because I don't actually have the confidence in my masculinity. I don't have the confidence in my assertiveness, my warrior, my fire. I don't have the confidence in myself to claim, to hunt, to say, you are mine. That aspect that women want, by the way, women want that thing. And I think that it can be said that there's probably a lot of confusion around for women as well around, wait, I want a masculine man and I want my empowerment. And with all of the narrative that men are seeing about, the future being female, which I hate those fucking shirts, bro. I swear to God, like I can't stand those shirts. The future is balance. Okay. The future is harmony.
Yeah. And the future is fucked unless it's human, right? It's like, until we can get to that point.
And so I think that women are seeing that same narrative and saying, wait, I want a masculine man, but I want my empowerment. What does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think in many ways, women have been incentivized to be in their masculine. They've also been shown and taught that in order to survive in a lot of corporate culture, they need to be in their masculine in order to survive, right? In order to, I guess, compete with men, but also to enter into those spaces because they have historically been dominated by men. And so, I think one of the challenges is that for a woman, it's there's sort of the double bind of being able to know whether or not she can surrender, whether or not she can soften, whether or not she can open, whether or not she can be vulnerable, whether or not she can, express her needs and wants and desires. And I think I see a lot of women who have gone down the path of trying to find a man that is more vulnerable than her in order to feel safe. And it causes a lot of complications because in some ways, he also needs to have that assertiveness. He needs to be grounded. He needs to be in touch with his masculinity, or those more masculine traits in order to be able to say, yeah, of course, tell me what you're feeling. Tell me what you're experiencing, what's going on. But the other thing that I think you said that stands out, that's very important, is a lot of conscious men, like I've been saying, because there's a lack of initiation, because there's wounding around their masculinity, right? Maybe they grew up in a household where they saw an abusive father, where they saw an alcoholic father, where their stepfather or grandfather was verbally or physically or sexually or emotionally abusive towards them or their mother. There's a fear of entering into their own masculinity because they're terrified of passing on that harm, because when they turn on the news and look at social media, what they see is that they're just bombarded with a tidal wave of men have hurt me. And so there's a lack of men knowing how to step into that embodied sacred quality of masculinity that is structured, that is ordered, that's grounded, that's safe. And then I think on top of that, men have outsourced, specifically conscious men have outsourced their validation and their worth to women. And it doesn't allow them to really be able to find a sense of grounding within themselves to be able to say, I am enough, right? God forbid a man say, actually, I'm good the way that I am. I am happy, deeply happy with the way that I am. And you keep trying to change me. So either you accept who I am fully in the moment and love me as I am, and let me embark on this journey, or you choose something different, and that takes work for a man to get into that place. One of the most common, I'll end with this. One of the most common questions I get from women is, how do I get my man to change? How do I get my man to go to therapy? How do I get my boyfriend to do X, Y, and Z? It's like, that, I think that's one of the traps that men fall into, is that they are abiding by that, right? They're running around trying to figure out, how do I just do whatever it is that my girlfriend wants? And then wondering why they're dissatisfied. And then their partners are also wondering why they're dissatisfied when they get that, right? When they get a guy that's just running after them, doing everything that they want.
It's so there's so many things that you said that were just gold there. So good, so good. And it's one of these asks. So I had this situation. I was dating a woman who had expressed the desire for deep partnership, deep union, right? And had also expressed the fear of, can I actually be an empowered entrepreneur with my business and have a man that I don't emasculate? And she said, because all of her mentors and like her powerful women that she looked to, they were all single. They were older and they were all single. And that is something that is super present. And here's the crazy part about that. So in our relating, I thought, the best thing that I can do is be fully available to her. Like when I go and spend time with her, let me be fully available. Let me clear my schedule as much as I possibly can. Let me ask her, what do you want to do today? Oh, you want to do that? Fuck what I want to do. Let me just go and be that. In large part because I thought, wow, let me see if we're a fit. Let me see what, because it was new dating, right? And so let me see what her flow is. Let me enter into her flow. And the funny thing about this experience is that after a couple of weeks of it, I felt incredibly emasculated. I felt completely emasculated, and I let her know, this isn't even your fault. I did this by actually letting my masculinity go out the window. And I did it from a loving place because I thought that's what would make us more harmonious.
Right.
However, the other piece to that was literally as a result, there's no sensitivity to actually my experience. It was this woman who was just like, let's do this. let's go here. Let's do this. And her thought was she was opening the world to me. Mm-hmm. and I was saying things like, hey, you know how I said I travel so much that one of the things that I don't get to do very often that I love so much is just to sit on the couch and read a book or journal and write some poetry. I don't get to do that as often. And so though that's really nourishing to me. And instead of applying that information into the dynamic, it was more do what I want to do, what I think will nourish you. And here's me doing this thing. And what I realized in that experience is that the women who are stepping into their masculine for creation, entrepreneurship, the way that society has been built to date really rewards masculine energy. And so women have taken that on of, I get to be more in my masculine if I want to be a successful business person, whatever. Yep. And stepping into that ownership and claiming is almost like the switch doesn't. Most of the women I've encountered don't know how to turn that switch just off. They need to encounter actual masculine energy that allows them to go, I can turn the switch off. Mm-hmm. And so I took incredible amount of ownership for if I had actually shown up in, hey, here's what nourishes me. Hey, I don't actually want to do that. Hey, let's create a container of blah, 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 blah. If I had shown up in that masculine energy, I'm curious how differently things may have gone, because that switch that caused me to feel emasculated was actually a co-creation of me sacrificing my own fire, passion, wants, desires, creating the structure for her to surrender into, right? And this was an experience for me that really went, whoa, my masculine energy is a necessity. It's an absolute necessity to create the harmony that is actually wanted by the feminine. And so for the reason I'm sharing this, for men listening to this, yes, we may have received all of this. Oh, we've heard the men have hurt people, blah, blah. I've been molested by a man. My father used to hit me growing up. I have had to heal my relationship with the masculine as well to feel safe in that way. And what I'm sharing is from personal experience, the actual healing and harmony that we want to see in our microcosmic relationships, and therefore as a fractal on the collective level, requires us to own our masculine energy in a healthy way.
Yeah, well said. I mean, there's some really good examples in there. And, I think one of the ththings that maybe we can make clear for everyone listening is, hopefully that's clear by now, is that there isn't just one thing that's contributing to this. This is multi-layered, so many different pieces that play into this. But I do think that on both sides, it's very challenging for, a lot of the women that write me, that I've worked with, they say it's hard for me to open up. It's hard for me to feel like really attracted to or vibrant with a man that I feel safe with, but at the same time, I don't feel attracted to, and there's like this interesting conundrum that a lot of women seem to be in. But on the other side, I think for a lot of men, there's this piece of them that it's easier for them to not have to step into their masculinity, to not have to move into that space, because it demands, it's uncomfortable, like the reason why, we could go into that, but not having initiation processes within our culture, not having rites of passage has created, in some ways, impotence within us as men, that in the sense that we aren't able to engage in healthy confrontation, in healthy conflict that turns into connection. Like one of the things that my wife and I talk about is transmuting conflict into connection. It's not that you want to live in a relationship without conflict. That's unrealistic. That just doesn't really exist. And if it does, you're avoiding shit, period, right? Just period. And so the aim is to learn how to architect yourself and a relationship in a manner that can face conflict and be able to turn that into a deeper quality of intimacy, to be able to navigate through those waters. So individually, we have to learn how to do that. And as men, most of us haven't been taught how to properly deal with conflict. We haven't properly been taught how to metabolize our own pain. So we're walking around with this hurt that we've been given from abuse as a child, or bullying as a kid, or deep heartbreak from a previous relationship that we've moved past, that still lives within us. And we haven't learned how to effectively carry that as a man. And so what happens? Well, as my good friend and colleague and mentor, Francis Weller, says, your pain has its own intelligence. So your pain's going to actively sabotage the thing that you want. It's going to get in the way. So, we lack in this quality of being able to engage in healthy confrontation, as especially within the conscious space for men. I see a lot of men that just don't know how to do it. They don't know how to stand up for what they want in a relationship. God forbid a man brings some fucking standards into a relationship, like God forbid. But I think it's what a lot of women are craving. It's like, have some standards of what you want, what you expect from me, what you want from our relationship and our dynamic. I remember when my wife and I first started dating, we had been dating for probably like several months, and we were on our very first vacation, and everything had been going like really well. And I don't even remember exactly what happened, but she said something to me that was really condescending and disrespectful. And I just turned to her and I was like, don't speak to me like that, and don't ever talk to me like that again. And that was it. That's all I said. It was very loving, right? It was just like, don't speak to me like that. And for her, she is the badass woman. She is like, when we first met, she was very in her masculine. She didn't know how to come out of that. And she was like the quintessential archetype of the woman that you were talking about. And I was the quintessential archetype of the conscious soft man that you were talking about, right? That we've been talking about. And in that moment, it kind of shifted things within our dynamic, because I set a very clear boundary of what was acceptable and what wasn't, and how I was okay with being talked to and how I wasn't. And it set a standard within our relationship. And one of the things that we talk about is like how we prioritize excellence within our relationship. That's what we're committed to. And it was interesting because we were on a podcast like a year or two later, and I totally forgot about this. And we were asked what was one of the defining moments in our relationship, like what was one of the most impactful things. And my wife retold that story, this moment that I had completely forgotten about. And she said, in that moment, I knew I could trust him because he had stood up for himself to me. And I think that is the missing essence of what a lot of men are experiencing, is that they can't stand up for themselves in their lives, whether it's to the woman that they're dating, whether it's in their workplace, whether it's with their friends, and they've lost the capacity of being able to harness themselves, sharpen themselves as men with other men. They're actually afraid to get around other high quality, high value men and be held accountable, and to receive feedback, and to face confrontation with another man, to say, don't do that. Don't speak to me like that. Don't engage with me like that. Or, hey, I've noticed that you've been drinking a lot more lately. Why is that? What's going on? To have much more direct and transparent conversations, So I think it's also, you can, like I say, you can tell the quality and the caliber of a man by the quality and the caliber of men that he spends the most time with. That is so true. If you show me a man, I'll be able to discern the quality and capacity of that man's masculinity based on the men that he spends time with. Guaranteed, right? If that man is out there spending time with guys that are just getting shit-faced every weekend and partying and doing drugs and acting completely unconscious, that'll be a representation of who he is. If he's surrounded by men that are spiritually bypassing and, emotionally manipulating women to get what they want, using psychological jargon to sound like they're safe in order to open a woman up so that he can fuck her and then move on, you'll be able to see that in a man, right? The quality of men that a man surrounds himself with will say something about who he is and his masculinity and whether or not he's actually safe.
Well said. Really well said. And that, to me, is I think there's a very physical component to this. Personally, I believe that a lot of this also stems from most men walk around the planet afraid they're going to get the shit kicked out of them. Like most men walk around, they don't know how to physically handle themselves.
Yep.
It's not something that you're taught necessarily growing up. It's the people who do, like, granted, the people who do learn to fight or whatever, a lot of them, that's coming from wounding too. So I just want to make sure that I preface that. And I know that for myself, as someone who used to train mixed martial arts, was a wrestler in high school, I've always been a small dude. I've just been a smaller individual, but learning how to fight, learning how to take care of myself changed so much for me. And I remember there was this thing when I was training mixed martial arts in college, where when I first started training it, I wanted to fight everyone. I would go out and almost, I wouldn't be picking a fight, but I would take very little shit. Like if someone looked at me the wrong way, whatever, it'd be like, flip them off from across the room or whatever. And just be like, I'm not scared. I like, challenge me. I want that rites of passage that you're talking. I want that, what I thought was the initiation. Yeah. And then once I started to actually develop the skill and realize, whoa, you can really hurt someone, and develop that confidence that I did know how to take care of myself, I actually went the whole other direction. Like it became, you could talk shit to me and I'm like, yo, bro, I don't need to get involved in this. That it went the other direction where there was no desire for me to actually get into physical conflict. And I think that switch, men need that switch. Because what's either happening is you're going out and you're causing harm to people to try and prove that to yourself, or you're avoiding standing up for what your values are, your integrity are, and you get pushed around because you're afraid you're going to get your ass kicked. And whether or not that, like, yes, I'm talking about it physically, but that translates into personality, that translates into energetic, that translates into your relationships. The ability for you to actually have the safety in your body that, listen, I might be a smaller dude than a lot of people here, but I'm not going down without a fight. Like I know how to handle myself, and I'm not scared of conflict for that reason. And I think, you're a new father, but when I become a father, which I'm very much looking forward to, once that happens, ladies, send in your applications. And once that actually happens, I'm excited to teach my child how to defend themselves, because I do think that aspect, and I think you learn it in indigenous cultures through even hunting, how to handle a knife, how to handle a bow, how to kill something, right? The life and death, those rites of passage that you're talking about. And I think that aspect of actual physically feeling like you can handle yourself is something, especially obesity rates and all of this stuff, that is massively contributing to this as well.
Absolutely. I think that, again, just to bring this back to initiation a little bit, that's what initiation is meant to do, right? It's meant to bring you into a kind of confrontation with the unconquerable, with death, right? With death. So when you look at a lot of initiation experiences, rituals, ceremonies, they bring you into some sort of commune with death in some capacity, whether it's through psychedelics, whether it's through, putting your hands into mitts where there's ants, biting your hands that are incredibly painful, tying a rope to your feet and jumping off something and having to measure it, or going through some form of psychological, emotional experience where you are confronted with your mortality in some way, right? Spending 5 days fasting out in nature on your own. Like we, at our men's weekends, we've designed the weekends in an initiatory fashion. So there's a call, there's a confrontation, right? You have to confront something, and you have to confront the other men, and you have no choice but to stare down the barrel of another man's anger, to really viscerally see it and to find that within yourself. A friend of mine says, Trevor Boehm, he says, be dangerous, but not a danger. Like, know that you have that capacity within you. It doesn't mean that you have to use it. It doesn't mean that you have to bring that out into the world or anything like that. But I think that here's the big catch. When we as men disconnect or disassociate from our dangerous aspect, we put it into our shadow. And that then shows up and sabotages us in our relationship. It sabotages us sexually, it sabotages us emotionally, financially, health-wise, because it becomes the disavowed, disconnected thing that we need in order to set those really healthy boundaries with our partner, in order to create the structure within our relationship, in order to provide the leadership within our career or our profession or our work. And so there's a price to be paid for disconnecting from that aspect of you that could potentially be dangerous and not harnessing it. You know, I think about myself, like I grew up in Northern Alberta, which is like Texas of Canada. And I was the enforcer in hockey. Like I was the fighter. And that carried on after I stopped playing hockey. There was no, you know, I had done some martial arts as a kid, but for me, it was the outlet, you know, going to bars and getting into bar fights and that kind of stuff. Like that was, I was the same way. I was looking for this kind of initiation experience, but I never found it in those confrontations because it's not real. It's manufactured, right? There's no elder there walking you through it. There's no psychological, spiritual component to it. You're not coming back better because of it. You're coming back having kicked somebody's ass or having your face punched, you know, like, so, you know, I think in many ways, a lot of this, maybe if we can sort of veer into, you know, how do we rectify some of this, is to invite men back into initiatory spaces, into rites of passage spaces, and to ask men, especially men who are of the conscious variety, what in your life have you been avoiding confronting? What in your life have you not wanted to confront truly, deeply, in your heart? What do you know you've been avoiding? And when you can start to look at that question, you can begin to formulate a pathway that will inevitably change who you are, because you will have to confront something that you would otherwise normally avoid. Whether it's your adoption, whether it's the past heartbreak that you went through, whether it's healing your sexual abuse, whatever that might be. When you start down that path, you will fundamentally be changed because of that confrontation.
That's a mic drop. That's a mic drop moment, bro. I 100% agree. I think that we all have a killer in us. We all have a predator in us. That it's there. And when we pretend that it's not, we actually feed it in an unconscious way, where it will pop up and it will come out in a weird, like unhealthy sexual fetish, or it'll come out in, drinking, or how we abuse our own bodies because we're ashamed of this thing that we're keeping in the closet. And I think conversations like this are so valuable and important, because I want everyone to know you as such a loving, incredible human, me as someone who's a loving human, is we are also saying we embrace the part of us that wants to punch someone in the fucking face sometimes. We embrace the part of us that also recognizes, well, I can go and burn this shit down too. I have those moments. I have that part of me that, yes, I love you unconditionally, but don't fuck with me. Like that aspect is there. That warrior is there. By the way, that energy is the same energy you bring into the bedroom. That warrior energy that wants to punch someone in the face sometimes, that warrior energy is also the one that wants to pick up my woman and take her into the bedroom and lay it down. That aspect of learning how to be with it and harness it is the thing that allows us to use it in a good way, to walk with it in a good way, because it's in you for a reason. It's not like you were born with this virus that you have to spend your entire life fighting against. It's actually a gift that you just get to learn how to cultivate and flow with that energy in the directions that are of your choosing, in a good, healthy way. And I think what you spoke to around the initiations of confrontation are incredibly important. I think what I spoke to also around the initiations of physically getting into your body and feeling good. And it doesn't mean you have to go fight someone. Just go lifting weights. Go feel your own strength. Go hit a heavy bag for a while. Go do things that let you access the parts of your strength that you don't normally access in a typically sedentary lifestyle that isn't demanding that you go hunt something or fight something or work a hard day's labor in that same way. Go learn your own body and learn how strong you actually are. And if you realize how weak you actually are, go get stronger. And that, to me, the confrontation, the physical, and then lastly, I would say the community. You know, I know we are both founders of communities. You with ManTalks, me with the Create community. It's just the places where you can come and grow with people who are in it with you. And so I'm so grateful that you've come on and shared your wisdom around this. I think, it's such an important topic. It just gets to be discussed.
Yeah, man, I agree. And I would just leave people with a couple of things, which is one, I always tell men, healing's not linear. It's not a rational journey. It's one of the obstacles that we have to get over. And secondly, growth and healing aren't meant to happen in isolation. And so find those communities where you're going to be pushed. Like, we are meant to heal. We are meant to grieve. We are meant to grow in community. We're meant to have other people see our confrontations. We're meant to have other people witness our grief. We're meant to have other people witness that anger, that predator within us, so that we know that we can be with it around other people. That is so absolutely vital. So bring those things, find a community for yourself that you can do the work that you need to face, and have other people surrounding you who can witness it, who can have their hand on your back, just making sure that you're moving forward or catching you when you fall. 100%.
And Connor, can you let people know how they can find out more about your community and the work that you're doing if they want to follow along and find out more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the easiest way, I'm pretty active on Instagram. It's at ManTalks. And then the website is just mantalks.com. And then if people want to engage more, there's obviously the podcast. And we do have an online men's group called The Alliance. And we've got something like 350 men in that group from around the world. And men get their own teams, the monthly book club, monthly challenges. And I bring in expert resources like Navy SEALs and sex therapists and entrepreneurs for them to learn from and grow with and ask questions. So it's a really awesome space.
Dope. And I just so appreciate the work that you're doing. Once again, thank you for taking the time to come on the deep dive. And for all of you deep divers who are listening to this, honestly, one of the best ways you can also help men right now is to share conversations like this. There are many men who may not feel ready to go to a retreat or do these things, and in the privacy of their own home can put on headphones and listen to a conversation like this. And so I believe the majority of people listening to this are actually female. So women, I'm going to give you a tip and a hint. Men want to do what you say. We want to actually please you. So send this to some men in your life, invite a conversation around it. This is something that gets to be normalized. And I just appreciate all of your support and continuing to choose to dive deep with me here every single week. And so thank you for being a part of this tribe and this community. I want to remind you that always, in all ways, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Blessings.